Where are we? When are we?
We're descending toward Hill Valley, California at 4:29 p.m. on Wednesday, October 21st, 2015.
2015? You mean we're in the future?
That's right, Marty! We are in the future! However, I should warn you that things did not quite turn out as planned. We don't have flying cars. We don't have holographic displays. Technically, we have a hoverboard, but it's not quite there yet. And, of course, we don't have time machines. It is raining, though. They did get that right. But rather than just whine ineffectually about all these awesome technologies we should be enjoying, I've decided to do my part to contribute something. So, I'm going to show you how, with the technology of save points, we can effectively travel back to the past! Now, first of all, if you want to build a time machine, you have to define what it is that you're trying to accomplish exactly. So I created this 2x2 matrix. In the columns you have the past and the future, and in the rows you have observe and affect. And these are basically the things that you might want to do with a time machine. Obviously, with the present, you can observe the present and you can affect the present, so I'm not even going to include that. Now, what can you do and what can't you do here? Well, you can observe the past through various means. However, you can't really observe the future, right? You can make predictions about the future, but they're never all that accurate. You can't affect the past, at least not on your own timeline, because it would lead to all sorts of paradoxes. It would allow you to do things like kill your own grandfather before your parents were conceived, that kind of thing. And then, of course, you know, who would be the one killing them if you're never conceived? It doesn't make sense. So, you know, unless there's many universes, which there might very well be, the Everett Many Worlds hypothesis, for instance, if we're stuck on one timeline, then you cannot affect the past. And, of course, affecting the future, well, you do that constantly. The decisions you make every day affect the future. Should I go to college? What should I major in? You know, all those things you can do, they affect the future. You might not know how they affect the future, but they will. So looking at this matrix here, if we just assume for a second that we can never really observe the future and we can never really affect the past, we're just assuming this for a second, then what can we do? We can observe the past and we can affect the future. You can travel into the future by simply freezing yourself. And, I mean, the technology is not quite there yet. There's a fracturing phenomenon that happens when you freeze yourself. It's not pleasant. It results in tissue damage, but they're working on ways of making it happen. And I think that probably within our lifetimes, they'll develop a way of, you know, freeze-drying people, basically, so that you could travel any arbitrary distance into the future that you want, but it's a one-way ticket. You can't go back. So it doesn't really help you in any way other than you just really want to see the future. But observing the past is what got me interested. So, I mean, people have made time capsules and stuff. You know, they plant something in the ground, some, you know, artifacts, some, you know, some little vestiges of their time, and it's of interest to the future. But it occurred to me that we have all these technologies today in the form of like audiovisual recording equipment, cameras and microphones and all this stuff. And wouldn't it be cool if we could record so much information that it wouldn't even be possible to take in all that information at once? So here's the idea that I had. You have these little stations consisting of 4 or more cameras that are looking in 360 degrees at all times. If you've got some money to burn, you could make them stereoscopic cameras, so they're basically recording like 2 eyes would, and then you can later see it, you know, through virtual reality in 3D. Each station can see in 360 degrees, so it can see and hear everything around it. Now, one station would gather a tremendous amount of data, but if you had these stations planted all over the place, what you could do is something kind of similar to the way Google Earth works. Now, they have Google Street View, and you can just jump into the eyes of that little Google car, and you can look around. They're static photos, but you can look around 360 degrees. So, I mean, this is not very novel in the sense that, I mean, Google's already doing similar stuff, and I'm sure they're moving in this direction that what I'm advocating here. But the difference is that instead of just taking pictures, this is taking video constantly and audio. So what you can do is later on you can jump from point to point And you can say, I want to look from this point in this direction, and boom, you're looking from that point in that direction at any specified time. Any time since the thing was powered up. If you collect enough data, you've got all these data points, and with the right equipment, with VR goggles or whatever, you could essentially jump into the eyes of this thing. And I mean, imagine it's about the same height as a person. It's meant to be analogous to a person. You can jump into the eyes of this thing at any point in the past since the thing was turned on, and you can see through its eyes. Now, what's the big deal? I mean, security cameras have been gathering data for a long time, and this isn't really that novel, right? Well, it is and it isn't. It depends on how you look at it. But I think there's an application for this that may or may not have been tried. Imagine you're at a party, and in this party, it's in a house, and there's multiple rooms of the house. And in each room, there's a certain number of people, clustered in a little group, and they're talking. Logistically, I mean, you really can't be in every room at once. You can only be in one room at a time, and you can at most listen to one conversation at a time. So all these different people could go to the same party, and they could all leave with totally different experiences. They essentially went to different parties because they had completely, totally different experiences. The conversations that are happening in this room are not going to be heard by the people in this room, and conversely. It's just a totally different experience. And so what this method would allow is that if you had these devices in every room, and obviously there's, security and privacy concerns with all this. I don't want to get into that stuff because we're in the brainstorming phase here. We don't want to get down into the naysaying mode. We're just going to think about what's possible, okay? You've got these devices in all these rooms, and these devices are recording 360 degrees, all the action that's going on, all the sounds, everything, okay? So you go to the party, you do your thing, and you go home at the end of the night, and you think to yourself, like, man, I'd really like to... I wish I would have talked to this person. I really want to know what they had to say. Now, you can't go back in time and actually talk to them, because we've already established that at least tentatively, stipulatively, we cannot go back in time and change the past. But what we can do is we can go back and observe the past. So with all these little data gathering devices, we can go back to the party, and I can go to a different room, and one of the rooms I maybe didn't even go into, talk to somebody, not me talk, but listen to somebody rather, listen to somebody that I never got to hear. So I can go back to the same party over and over and over. It's kind of like that movie Source Code, where the guy is trying to prevent the train from getting blown up, and he keeps going back again and again. Kind of like that. You could go back to the same party as many times as you want, and you could observe it from as many different angles as you have devices. And you could really, there was so much more data, so much more stuff that happened than you could possibly experience in one session, but conceivably, you could go back and re-experience it over and over, and you would get a new experience every time. It wouldn't just be the same experience, it would be a totally different experience every time you went back to the same party. Obviously, people are going to have to be willing participants. If you're recording them surreptitiously, that's unethical and usually illegal. But that's the idea behind a save point. Each one of these things is a save point. Like in a video game. You're playing a video game, you die. Most modern video games do not send you back to the very beginning of the game. That's some sadistic stuff. That's the kind of stuff you'd expect from like a 1980s video game. Modern video games, they usually send you back to a save point. And you can resume from there, and it's not quite as frustrating. So with these save points, you can jump back into a certain place at a certain time. As long as that data is intact, you can always, a year from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, you could go back to that place in time. That's something that has never been possible until recently. With the advent of video and audio recording technology that's relatively new, we can now go back to a particular place in time. Not change it, but observe it in ways that has never been possible before. So I'm going to show you what I mean by creating a save point. Now I only have 4 cameras. I have 2 Flip Ultra HDs and I have 2 iPhone 6s. That's all I have. Ideally, you would have way more cameras. You would have at least 4 cameras, maybe 8 for stereoscopic, times the number of save points you wanted. But I'm just going to make one save point with 4 cameras, and I'm going to take it around town today, October 21st, 2015, and from now until the end of time, this day will be cemented. People will be able to go back to these places that I visit today and observe what happened, however interesting or boring, from those different camera angles. So I will post that video as soon as I can. For now, this was the idea of the save point, and if you subscribe to my channel, you will see the actual save points that I will create. Cheers.